Aloha and welcome to Business in Hawaii with Reg Baker. We are broadcasting live from the Think Tech studios in downtown Honolulu in the Pioneer Plaza in the Think Tech studios. Yeah, they got two studios, so we're in the other one. We are a show about positive stories in Hawaii. We've heard all the negatives. There's challenges, of course. But we're trying to highlight some of the success stories and some of the positives that are going on in Hawaii. And there are a lot to talk about in those categories. We are just now wrapping up tax season. And for some of you, you're relieved that it's behind you. For me, it was a very challenging 2 months. I would say that in the 30 years that I've been doing this, this has probably been the toughest tax season I've had. And for a lot of reasons. I think that one of them is that the IRS is underfunded. We've heard about that. Their staffing has had some high turnover. They're losing a lot of people, so they're understaffed, they're underfunded. And they've also had a lot of work piled onto them with the Affordable Care Act, with some of the cybersecurity issues they've been having, the hacking, people getting into the systems, and then with the identity theft. As a matter of fact, some refunds are being delayed up to 8 weeks because of additional security measures that they're putting on for the identity for the refunds coming back from the IRS. So if you're one of those unfortunate ones, please, it's not your CPA that's making that happen. It is part of the system, and unfortunately, it's something that we may have to live with for a while. But enough about the federal tax situation. We've got Tom Yamachika here today with the Tax Foundation. He has taken over quite successfully, I guess a short period of time ago, and he's getting his feet wet, and I just want to welcome Tom to the show.
Thank you, Reg. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's great. Now, you're an attorney by training, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and did you go to law school here, or what's your background?
I went to public school here, and then from there I went to a little college in Connecticut on the mainland. It's called Yale.
That little one.
Yeah, it's kind of small, when you compare it to like some big mainland universities. It doesn't have that great of a football team or that great of a football stadium, but it's still a very nice campus, and was able to meet a lot of very high-powered and very smart people.
Oh, I would imagine. The education you would get there must be phenomenal.
I thought so. And then from there, I went to law school on the other coast, UC Berkeley.
Another reputable school.
Yeah, and it was at a time when you could still qualify to get resident tuition if you lived there, got a driver's license, and did a couple minor things. The residency requirements have since been toughened up quite a bit.
Yeah, well, I guess everybody's trying to raise the dollars, and I guess that public college over there, the University of California, gets a lot of revenue from the tuitions from out of state, and I guess that's probably true across the country.
Probably.
Yeah. So, and then did you work on the mainland for a while, or did you come back to Hawaii? Or?
I came back home, and I worked in the federal court system for a year. I clerked for a U.S. Court of Appeals judge, the former Attorney General of Hawaii, Herb Choi. Mm. And after that, I started working for a large law firm.
Very good. And then you were there for a number of years, and
right. And then interesting thing happened. I was representing some domestic insurance companies, and they were litigating with foreign insurance companies over certain tax provisions. And in the course of that litigation, I was kind of on the same side with the tax department, and I met a number of the attorney generals who were handling that litigation. And one of them kind of approached me afterwards and said, "Hey, what do you think about doing some public service?" And I go, "Oh, what's that?" And then, but instead of joining the attorney generals, there was an opening at the state tax department itself. Oh. And so I went there, and I trained under the tax director at that time was Rick Kale, who and I'm sure you know this. had an encyclopedic knowledge of Hawaii state tax law, having an extensive background at the Legislative Reference Bureau, among other places. So he knew the stuff backwards and forwards, and I pretty much trained under him.
Very good. Now, he was there for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah, mostly before I got there. I got there in the final year and a half of his tenure, because in 90, I forget what year it was, when Governor Cayetano got elected. A new slate of people came in, including Ray Kamikawa, who at that point became the tax director and my boss. So.
And what did you do over there at that time?
I was a rules specialist, and so, like every tax agency has attorneys there who draft legislation, work on ruling requests, help with the forms and instructions to make sure that all of the legal requirements are met, and that the instructions are correctly reflecting what the law says.
Well, that's nice to have that correlation.
Yeah. So at the time, there were, I think, 3 or 4 of us in that position, and one of them is still there, but in a different capacity.
So you come to us today with a lot of background in that side of the equation, as far as drafting up the rules and regulations, I guess, interpreting what gets passed through the legislature, and then how it's going to be implemented and worked in. So you've got a pretty strong background in that area.
Well, I've just seen a lot of stuff, that's all.
Very good. And then I guess, were you involved with the Tax Foundation back in those days?
No, I wasn't. I had kind of learned about it a lot later. And this was when I was in practice. One of the things that I was trying to do was, after I had finished with the tax office, I never really intended to stay there forever. I went to private practice, but in kind of an interesting twist, I didn't go to a law firm. I went to an accounting firm. At the time, it was Coopers and Lybrand. That was before they had merged with Price, and of course, the result of that merger was PricewaterhouseCoopers, which at that time was the largest accounting firm, probably in the world.
I had worked for Pricewaterhouse in LA for several years, not in the tax side, but specializing in the financial services, S&L. Remember when the S&Ls were consolidating in California and throughout the country, and now pretty much they're gone, and that the ground zero for that was in California. And I was with Pricewaterhouse advising them on how to go through that process and some asset liability management systems.
Yeah, so it was on the, when I was with the accounting firm, that's when I got introduced to the Tax Foundation.
Now, Pricewaterhouse actually has a pretty large, or they used to, I don't know if they still do, but they had a pretty large, legal department. I think from what I understand from my days back then, a lot of the big 8 firms, now the big 4, used to have some of the largest quote-unquote law firms in the country. They'd have hundreds of attorneys working for them.
Well, I don't know about hundreds, but they had several with backgrounds similar to mine, except that they had been trained at IRS.
Right, but that would be locally, or several, when you say several?
Yeah, the big firms usually had them,
Yeah.
and those offices tended to be in Washington, D.C.
That's, yeah.
Yeah,
that's where I was
primarily
going with that.
because they would then go and interface with the current employees.
Very good, yeah, so that's a good pedigree. So you've got the law firm background, you got the department taxation background, you've got the CPA accounting background, and then at what point did you transition into the Tax Foundation?
Well, when I was with the accounting firm, I got involved with the Tax Foundation. I was going to their breakfast briefings, which they have throughout the legislative session, to update people on the laws that are going through. And of course, it was being, at the time, headed by Lowell Kalapa, who is probably one of the most recognizable figures at the legislature on this type of subject matter. So after a while, I was asked to join their board, and I did, and served on there a few years, I think it was, Um, and then in 2013, I left Acuity, which was what the local office of PricewaterhouseCoopers had become, and I decided to go out on my own practice. And at the end of 2013, Lowell Kalapa unexpectedly died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. And I wasn't on the inner circle, but it came as a surprise to me because I think, just seen him, a month or two earlier, and he seemed to be fine. But
yeah, I mean, I don't, to this day, I don't know what he died of, and what was so sudden about it, but that's what happened.
A shame.
And at the time, there was a lot of angst because basically the Tax Foundation and Lowell were kind of, he was perceived as the big driving force behind it.
Almost one and the same.
Almost one and the same. And so the question was, well, geez, what's going to happen to the Tax Foundation? And so we on the board were kind of like wondering what to do. And then I kind of noticed that I was the only self-employed person on the board. So I thought, well, I've just started working on my own. Maybe I can, squeeze out some time for this. I know the Tax Foundation's in a real pinch because the 2014 session was cranking up, and they really needed a presence at the legislature. And it's got to be somebody who knew a little bit about state tax, and I thought I did. So I said, well, why don't I do this for this, at least for the session.
For 2014.
If the 14 session. So I joined up with them as interim president until, I think my contract went till the end of June of 2014. And then when that session came and went, and the June board meeting came, and I said, well, I wouldn't mind staying on. So I signed a contract with the Tax Foundation. My interim came off, and I became president of the Tax Foundation of Hawaii.
You're now permanent.
Until they fire me or whatever. Yeah.
Well, as permanent as permanent can be.
Right. So I'm there, and they have to deal with me.
Right. Well, it was fortunate that you were there at the time, because it was, I think, a scary time for some people. Because the Tax Foundation does do an important role. They have an important role, and they're there for a purpose. And we'll probably, maybe we'll go into that later. But right now, you said you're still self-employed. You still have a practice.
Right. The Tax Foundation is good work. It's important work, but it doesn't pay the bills. So I kept my legal practice going. I do have my own clients. I represent them in tax disputes and other, I do consulting.
Very good. Consulting on tax matters or legal
Yes.
matters or? Okay.
Tax matters.
Very good. Very good. So you're and would it be fair to say that you specialize in state tax matters?
That's the emphasis of my practice, yes.
Yeah, state side, but and sometimes there's a correlation between federal and state. I mean, there is some similarities, but not always.
Yeah, I mean, a large part of our state income tax law is based on federal. And we do that by design, so people, at least in theory, would have an easier time complying.
Well, and not only the taxpayer, but also the software manufacturers that try to make the software to make it all work.
Absolutely.
The more similar we can be to the feds, the easier it is to have them incorporated into that overall package. So we've had some challenges with that over the years. It's always been, it adds an interesting twist to the tax season. But we're gonna go on a short break right now. And when we come back, I'd like to spend some time in the Tax Foundation and what it is and how it originated and what it does and that sort of thing. So this is Business in Hawaii with Reg Baker. We're here with Tom Yamachika, the president of the Tax Foundation of Hawaii. And in our next segment, we're going to be driving down into the details of the Tax Foundation and see how they operate. So we'll be right back in 60 seconds.
Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I host Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. which streams live educational and civic engagement on the internet and Oceanic Channel 16. I love doing this show because it's an opportunity to be able to share some of the good news as well as the pressing issues for Hawaii and the world about climate change, climate justice, and sustainability, and the need to start employing and continue to request sustainable policy initiatives and actions on the part of our decision makers here and abroad. So I hope you'll tune in with me every Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. as we try and engage you, share a lot of very interesting people's work and perspectives, and perhaps turn you on to taking action for sustainability. Mahalo and aloha.
Welcome back. This is Business in Hawaii with Reg Baker. I'm here with Tom Yamachika, with the president of the Tax Foundation here in Hawaii. And we're going to talk a little bit now about the Tax Foundation itself and how it got set up and what it does. So, Tom, introduce us to the Tax Foundation.
Well, the Tax Foundation of Hawaii is a watchdog agency. What we do is we try to look out for taxpayers, especially at the legislature. And it came about as an outgrowth of the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii. This was back in the 50s. Prior to then, there was people in the Chamber of Commerce who were interested in taxes, and obviously it's a big issue affecting lots of businesses. So they had a number of people that were around a table to take a look at it, and they thought that the mission of the Chamber of Commerce would be better served if the tax folks were in a separate entity, right? So maybe they're just different. A lot of times I think tax people are just different, and maybe they thought the same thing. So,
well, even in the CPA world, they think tax people are different.
There
so
we go.
Go ahead. All right.
So they formed a separate charitable organization, and this I think is probably worth mentioning. There are many flavors of tax-exempt organizations, as I'm sure you're aware. Not all tax-exempt organizations, when you donate to them, can you take a deduction. Chamber of Commerce is what we call a 501c6, which means that if you're a business and joining that organization is a business expense, then you can take it as a business expense, but you can't take a charitable deduction. The Tax Foundation is a 501c3, which means you can take a deduction because we focus on education, not necessarily the advancement of business, but we educate people, especially our lawmakers, on what it is that they're passing, because sometimes they don't know.
And just a point of clarification, if you are a business, you could still be a member of the Tax Foundation and get that deduction. You don't have to call it a charitable contribution. You could call it a business deduction, right?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't want to exclude any businesses from joining just because it's a charitable organization.
Yeah, and they can take the deduction either way.
Yep. Good. Okay.
And, joining organization is very easy. You just go on our website and click the button.
What is the website name?
tfhawaii.org. So, Tax Foundation of Hawaii, tfhawaii.org.
Okay, very good. And if anybody has any questions, they can just reach out to you and you can give them some answers on that too.
Right, yeah.
And I would imagine if you did a Google search of Tax Foundation of Hawaii, it would pop up as well.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. Very good.
Yeah, so we're at the legislature a lot of the time, primarily because tax is a subject that a lot of people kind of shy away from. So if you get to, especially the bills that the tax department is advancing, right? Usually when you're at the legislature and there are bills that the tax department is pushing, there's nobody else there to say anything about them because they don't know what's going on. That's why we're there. So we can provide a different perspective from the department who's pushing the bill to give legislators a more balanced assessment of what's going on.
And you're also able to, and I think that's part of your education and outreach efforts, is to educate the public on some of this as well. So that if they wanted to participate and have a voice, they could do that.
Right. Throughout the session, we have breakfast briefings, and we gather a number of people, mostly business people. They listen to both me and another organization present on different kinds of bills that are going through the legislature, and if they're interested, they can take whatever action they think is necessary. But we're not there to take action. We're not there to lobby. We're just here to educate and say, here's what's going on. If you think this is strange or ridiculous, then go tell your legislator.
Right. Now, that's an interesting point. You're not a lobbyist.
No.
But you're an educator.
Right.
So you can go and educate the elected officials on the pluses and minuses of something, but you don't really do anything to convince them one way or another.
Yes, we do not take a position on anything. We just provide comments on all of the pending bills.
Okay. So it's truly an educational and an outreach process.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are some bills that we don't think are logical or that make sense, and we say that, but we always have reasons.
Good.
We're not just waving our fist in the air,
No, it's nice to be able to wave that fist, but have a reason for doing so and being able to justify it. And I think sometimes the people need to have that kind of a voice, because they may not totally understand the ramifications of what's going on either. Sometimes there's surprises in there. There's unintended consequences of some of these things that get approved. And I'd also venture to say that maybe some of the elected people voting on this don't always understand everything that's involved in what they're trying to do as well.
Yeah, and there have been legislators who have talked to me and have admitted as much. And so they arrange a meeting with me after session, or during a certain day during session, and they have some questions about what does this do or what does that do, and I go down and I give them my take on what it accomplishes or what it doesn't.
Good. And have you found them to be receptive to that? Are they interested in hearing it?
Some people are. Some people obviously have their own ideas, but I think most people are interested in having a balanced perspective.
Okay. And you've got a board, and you work with the board. How many people are on your board?
I think 17 or 18.
Well, that's a pretty good sized board. Very good. And then you're membership based, and people can join as a member, and they can be either business or individual.
That's correct.
Is there different dues required depending upon business or individual?
Yes, we have a whole schedule, and different classes of membership that entitle you to different things.
Right, and that's on your website as well?
Yes.
Yeah, good. All right, and then are you looking for members? I mean, are they?
All the time.
All the time, okay.
Any charity is always looking for members.
Good. And other than being a member and paying their dues, and I guess there's classes, there's, during a legislative session, there's the breakfast. But is there any other type of committees or any other type of involvement that the members can get engaged with and help with?
That's pretty much left to staff. So what we do as staff is we deal with interfacing with the legislature. We summarize the legislation and we send it out. We handle interviews with the press. We do our breakfast briefings, like I said. We put out a weekly column, and the weekly column does get picked up in quite a few places.
Good. I was thinking maybe you should have like an annual picnic committee or something, where you could go out and have this big picnic and talk about taxes. And have a barbecue.
We do have an annual lunch.
There you go.
Yeah, happens in late August, early September.
And that's all done by staff?
Yeah, we put it on. Last year, we were honored to have Sylvia Luke be our keynote speaker, And she came down and she talked about responsible budgeting, and she was a great speaker with great handouts. And many people that were in attendance told me that they really enjoyed the presentation.
Very good. Well, next time, make sure you invite the rail to come and talk about responsible budgeting. They need some help. So, very good. What else? Anything else about the Tax Foundation you'd like to share?
Well, one of the things that we had been doing, which is kind of different from what we normally do, is we talk a lot about legislation and whether it's proper or improper, but we really haven't done anything about it. So in this particular, in October of last year, we actually filed suit against the state to restrain a particular law or practice which we found to be really what we thought is unconstitutional. And that, of course, is how in Honolulu they have a surcharge on our general excise tax that goes to support rail. Mm-hmm. Well, only 90% of that actually goes to rail. 10% is pinched off by the state and is used to support whatever they want.
It goes into the general fund.
It goes into the general fund. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't be so bad if that's what it cost, because we recognize that the surcharge is collected by the state tax department and has to go through several processes over there, and obviously there are costs associated with that, but the costs aren't $25 million.
No,
which is what the 10%.
Yeah, it's got to be significantly less, because that's disclosed separately on the GET forms when they're sent in, and it's just a simple programming to redirect that into the general fund. There's not a lot of fingerprinting that has to go on that to make that happen.
I don't think so.
Yeah, interesting. So you filed suit, and how is that progressing?
Well, it didn't go so well. Our suit was tossed out by the First Circuit Court. The court was of the view that we have provisions in the law that protect against judicial interference in tax collection, similar to the Federal Tax Injunction Act, and so we have something similar to the state, and they felt that it had to be applied here, and it blocked our action.
Okay, so if someone didn't have much experience in the legal and the tax world, basically that means that they can't, somebody can't interfere with a government agency trying to collect taxes.
That's right.
Basically the bottom line.
That's the basic bottom line, yes.
Yeah. So that's, to me, that tends to open the door for a lot of potential abuse.
Yeah. That's one reason why we're still considering our options. We haven't given up yet. I am in the process of reviewing our options with the legal team that was so kind to help us get this lawsuit started, and we'll be coming up with a decision, or at least a direction in which to go in the next probably week or two.
Well, it sounds...
But that's a very different thing from what the foundation used to be doing.
Well, it sounds like you've become a little bit more proactive.
Well, I don't want people to say that we're all talking no action.
Well, there's some action there now, so congratulations. That's very good. We're going to take another short break. We'll come back, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on this legislative session, and maybe what went on a little bit in previous sessions, and maybe we can kind of see the trends and how things are getting better or maybe not. But this is a Business in Hawaii with Reg Baker. We're going to take another 60-second break, and we're going to be coming back to talk more with the Tax Foundation.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina. president of the Grassroot Institute, and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the Think Tech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to Think Tech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the Think Tech Hawaii broadcast network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Welcome back. This is Business in Hawaii with Reg Baker. Today we're talking with Tom Yamachika with the Tax Foundation. We've had a pretty active session this year with some tax bills. We've had some pretty active sessions in the past as well. So we're going to touch base with Tom a little bit and see what his thoughts are. How does this session compare to maybe the previous session or two? Or do we got more bills, less bills? What do you think?
Well, in terms of overall activity, I think it's a little bit less. I mean, in terms of what we're following, and I think one of the big reasons for that is it's an election year, and if you mess with the tax law in a way that voters don't like, you may find yourself out of a job. So we
I guess
think
that's an argument, Tom, for having shorter terms and more frequent elections, right?
Well, it depends on which side you're on, right? But the good news is that there were earlier in the session a lot of bills to increase many different kinds of taxes. Lots of them are now dead. There was a bill to reinstate the 9, 10, and 11% rates that we used to have on income tax. That's dead.
So where does it cap at now?
8 1/4.
8 1/4. Good.
Okay.
Good. Good.
There were bills to add additional 1.5% on the general excise tax, the 1% for HSTA or education, and 0.5% for long-term care. Both of those are dead. There were bills.
Now that would have cost the taxpayers, individual taxpayers, a lot. Those could have been expensive. How much do you think we saved by killing those two bills?
Maybe $750 million.
That's a job well done there. That's good.
Well, it wasn't just me. I mean, there are a lot of people who got involved in the legislative process, senator wrote the representative and said, we don't want this. And that's kind of what you have to do to beat it.
Well, I know the chamber was involved in that a little bit, and I was chair of the small business committee, so we got engaged with that a little bit. But nonetheless, it's important to have people there providing testimony, education, and helping people get the word out. So we saved ourselves $750 million roughly in increased taxes. So that's I think a job well done, and everybody should get kudos for that.
I think so.
Very good. Now, I saw your update of all the different bills that you're currently following, and I think I added up, and there's about 36 of them. And that's a pretty active schedule to follow all of this because there's different hearings and different things going on. And but actually, this is the number that exists today. It actually started out with a few more, didn't it?
Quite a bit more. Right now, the grid that we have, and it's on this table right over here. It's about 4 pages. It started off as, filling up 7 or 8 pages.
Yeah.
So it's about twice as many as there are now.
Very good. And a lot of those, did a lot of them get consolidated? I mean, explain to us maybe how this process works a little bit.
Okay. Bills can start off with any legislator, and they then have to go through both the Senate and the House, not necessarily in that order. We have Senate bills and we have House bills. House bills start in the House, Senate bills start in the Senate. Senate bills finish in the House, and House bills finish in the Senate. So at one point in the middle, they cross over. During the process, the bills are referred to committees. Different committees, hear different subject matters, and depending on the committees to which a bill is assigned, what happens is the committee looks at it, decides whether to hear it. If they hear it and they like it, they pass it. If they don't hear it or they don't like it, then it doesn't go any further.
Mm.
So,
And that's what they call dying in committee.
that's correct.
Good. But they can also add something to it.
They can also change things that are going through. That's correct.
Yeah. And that's where the sausage making process comes up.
Right. The content of a bill is only limited by the bill's title, and a lot of the bill's titles are extremely broad, like relating to taxation or relating to general excise tax. So there's room for a lot of mischief if you're not watching. So that's what we try to do. We try to watch.
Right, and I think that's an important function. Even if you don't catch anything, the fact that you're there watching sometimes discourages people from doing some mischief.
Yeah, one example of that, and I'll just kind of toss out an example. There's this bill called Senate Bill 2652, and it talks about getting a tax credit going for renewable fuel production. We have already a tax credit for ethanol production, but nobody really took advantage of that because no ethanol plants were ever built. So they wanted to kind of broaden that. But when that bill went back into the House added something, and they added a credit for organic foods production, which to me has very little, if anything, to do with renewable fuels.
So how do you think they were able to add that in there? Just nobody caught it?
It was a committee. The committee amended the bill. The bill title was broad. Poof, in it goes.
Interesting. And where is that bill now? Is it still alive?
It is still alive. It's in House Senate conference, and it was alive as of yesterday.
And this is a credit for people who produce organic food.
That's right. So if you're a small farmer and you want to grow organic vegetables and you need some help with the costs of getting organic certification, among other things, then if this bill passes, the people of the state of Hawaii will help pay for that.
Okay. And they have, through the certification process, I guess that defines what is organic and what is not organic.
Right.
Okay. Because I have found from my experience that sometimes they can pass a law or a bill, but it's the implementation, the regulation, the interpretation that gets a little tricky.
Right. We've seen that with the solar credit for renewable energy technologies. The interpretations of what was allowed and what stacked upon what. I mean that's kind of shifted over time. The Department of Taxation said, well, yes, started off being really expansive, and then people kind of started taking advantage of it and started driving trucks through the hole, so they had to close it down, or at least make it more difficult to go through it.
Mm-hmm. It could get expensive. If the two credits have to be, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, a credit is for trying to motivate or to promote a very specific type of act, something that they want to see happen.
Right. But you have to kind of look at the overall goal of the tax system in general, and that is the tax system is there to raise money to run government. Okay. Tax credits to do what you have suggested means it's a social policy tool. You're using the tax system to help motivate social policy. Is that good or is that bad? People have different views on that.
That's true. And in some cases it's one or the other. Some cases are good, some cases are bad. But I think government, both federal and state, has used taxes and tax policy to socially engineer their communities.
Yeah, no, there's no question that it's been used in the past, and it's had different kinds of effects. But one of the things that we always tell lawmakers is is with a tax credit, you know, it's not like spending money on a you know, set of textbooks, for example. You go out and you buy the textbooks, you know how much you paid. You enact the tax credit, you don't know how much it's going to cost.
That's true.
Because anybody who does what you want, right, and as defined in the tax credit statute, is entitled to claim a certain amount for the tax credit, which means you as the government have to pay it.
Right. Now, I think for the viewers, there's a big difference between tax credits and tax deductions. You know, a tax deduction is a legitimate expense. It can be deducted and resulting in lower taxable income. A credit actually is it's a payment of a tax back to you. You know, you actually get dollar for dollar refund or payment in this tax credit against your tax dollars. So the impact is significantly more, not only for the taxpayer, but also as a cost for the government giving the credit. And that's why I think the Tax Foundation is very cautious and very conservative about their tax credit position. Did I say that well, or did you want to add to that?
That's quite accurate.
Okay, very good. You know, we've got just a few minutes left. Is there anything in these bills that's coming up? I guess we're getting near the end of the session, but is there anything really critical in here we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, there's been a long-standing feud. I don't know if that's the right word, between the state and the counties over how much money they're going to get
Well,
off
they've
of
been
our.
feuding for generations.
Oh
you know.
yeah, but this is over our transient accommodations tax. So so now we have like very different ideas that have come out from the House, the Senate, and from the task force that was convened under last year's law to try to look at that. So last year they gave the counties a few more $1 million to split among themselves, and they set up this task force or working group. Working group came back and had one recommendation. Senate didn't like that; they recommended something else. House didn't like that; they recommended something else. And now we have a very interesting show that's unfolding before us, and we don't know how it's going to come out, if anything.
I guess the counties want more and the states want to keep more. And so there's that inherent dichotomy there, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's not new. I've seen that before in other areas. It's unfortunate, but
It's a fact of life, and it's a fact
it's
of
the way
politics.
it's the way it is what it is. All right, very good. And for those that are interested to find out a little bit more about the Tax Foundation, can you tell us one more time the website where they can go get more information?
Sure, it's on www.tfhawaii.org. So T for tax and F for foundation, hawaii.org.
Very good.
And we have lots of stuff over there that's accessible to the public, including our weekly commentaries and you know, different news items, including like 50 state maps on various topics.
And you've got a good archive file too in there. There's some things from the past that they can look up and do some research on.
Oh yeah, we have lots of Lowell's columns loaded on already, and all of that is searchable.
Very good. Well, Tom, we really appreciate you coming on the show today, this week. We probably want you to come back again and maybe give us some warnings about what to look for next year, and give us you know, some thoughts on how we should respond and react. Thank you for being on the show. This is Reg Baker, Business in Hawaii. We air live every Thursday at 2 o'clock. You can catch us live on the thinktechhawaii.com website. You could also call in for questions. We have a call-in question capability now. So next week I'll be sure to give you that number, and hopefully we can get some calls coming in. So you guys have a good week. Take care and see you next Thursday. Aloha.